Shabbat Tov, and welcome back for another weekly Parsha reading. I'm back in my pre-recorded format in a bit of a transition period, so you're in the office with me today. This week we're moving on to Parashat Yitro, and I'm reading from the Gutnick edition of the Chumash, and this is on the name of Parashat Yitro, and it reads, Yitro was an idol worshipper. In fact, he had worshipped every idol that was known to exist. How could the Parsha in which the Torah is given be named after an idol worshipper? The idol worshippers were not fools, as it may seem at first glance. Rather, they were intellectuals who spent their lives pondering the higher spheres of existence. So when Yitro, priest of Midian, abandoned idolatry and came to the desert, it was an informed decision. And when he said, "Now I know that God is greater than all the other deities," he was accrediting Torah with the honor that an esteemed individual testified that Torah is the greatest wisdom of all. In this way, he handed over his idol worship to the Torah. Chassidut teaches that there's a subtle overtone of idol worship in any mitzvah that is done for an ulterior motive. The idol worshipper looks to a force other than God, and a mitzvah that is performed without the correct intentions is also an act that is done for a motive other than God's will. Obviously, the comparison is an extremely remote one. Even if a mitzvah is performed for the wrong reasons or out of rote, it is still a good deed. But the fact remains that an ulterior motive makes a mitzvah smell of idol worship. Does that mean that a person should stop doing mitzvot if his motive is not pure? Not at all. A person should always continue to observe the mitzvot, even if his motives are not entirely pure, because eventually he will do them for the right reasons. Then he'll become like Yitro, because all the good deeds that he performed for the wrong reasons, his former idol worship, will be handed back over to God. And that is based on Sichat Shabbat Parashat Yitro in the year 5737 from the Lubavitch Rebbe. And now for the Parsha. Yitro, the priest of Midian, father-in-law of Moshe, heard about the splitting of the Sea of Reeds and the war with Amalek, and all that God had done for Moshe and for Israel, his people, providing them with manna and water in the desert, and most importantly, that God had taken Israel out of Egypt. Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, took with him Zipporah, Moshe's wife, who had been sent away back home by Moshe to save her from entering Egypt, and her two sons. One of them was named Gershom, because he, Moshe, said, "I was a stranger, a ger, in a foreign land." And one was named Eliezer, because the God of my father came to my aid, Elohai Avi Be'ezri, and rescued me from Pharaoh's sword. Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moshe to the desert where he was encamped by the mountain of God. He sent a message to Moshe, "I, Yitro, your father-in-law, am coming to you, and so is your wife and her two sons with her." Moshe, together with Aharon, Nadav, and Avihu, and a huge welcoming committee, went out to greet his father-in-law, and he, Moshe, bowed down and kissed him. They asked about each other's welfare, and they entered the tent. Moshe told his father-in-law about all that God had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships that had befallen them on the way, with the sea and with Amalek, and that God had saved them. Yitro rejoiced about all the good that God had done for Israel, in sending them manna, but most of all because he had rescued them from the hand of Egypt, since no slave had ever escaped from there before. Yitro said, "Blessed is God who has rescued you from the hand of Egypt, a mighty nation, and from the hand of Pharaoh, a mighty king, who has rescued the people from the tyranny of Egypt. Even before this, I believed in God, but now I know that God is greater than all the deities which I've worshipped in the past. For with the same thing that they plotted, to drown Jewish babies in water, he punished them, drowning the Egyptians instead in the sea." Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to God. Aharon and all the elders of Israel came to dine with Moshe's father-in-law before God, and Moshe himself served the meal. On the day after Yom Kippur, when Moshe came down from Mount Sinai with the second set of tablets, Moshe sat down to judge the people. The people stood before Moshe from the morning until the evening. Moshe's father-in-law saw what he was doing to the people, and he said, "What is this thing you are doing to the people? Why do you sit by yourself while all the people stand before you from morning until evening?" Moshe said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to seek God's teachings. If any of them has a claim, he comes to me, and I judge between a man and his fellow. I make known the statutes of God and his teachings." Moshe's father-in-law said to him, "The thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear yourself out, along with Aaron, Hur, and this nation that is with you. For the matter is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me, I will advise you, but let God be in agreement with you on this matter. You should represent the people before God, and you will bring their disputes to God. You will caution them about the statutes and the teachings, and you will show them the path to follow and the things that they must do. But using divine inspiration, you should seek out from among all the people financially independent men who fear God, men of truth whose words are reliable, and who hate monetary gain through litigation. You should appoint them over over the people with differing levels of responsibility, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, and leaders of 10s. They'll judge a people on a full-time basis. When any major matter arises, they will bring it to you, but the minor matters they will judge for themselves. This will make it easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. Now consult God about this suggestion, and if he consents and you do this thing, you will be able to remain firm. Furthermore, Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, and the 70 elders who are also becoming worn out will come to their destination in peace. Moshe listened to his father-in-law and did all that he said. Moshe chose financially independent men from among all Israel and appointed them as heads over the people, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, and leaders of 10s. They judged the people on a full-time basis. They'd bring any difficult case to Moshe, and they judged minor cases themselves. Moshe saw his father-in-law off, and he went away to his land to convert his family. On the first day of the 3rd month after the children of Israel's departure from Egypt, they arrived at the desert of Sinai. They had departed from Rephidim doing tshuva, and they arrived at the desert of Sinai doing tshuva. They encamped in the desert. Israel encamped there towards the east side of the mountain in a state of total unity, as if they were one single person with one heart. Moshe ascended to God on the 2nd day of the month, early in the morning. God called to him from the mountain, saying, "You should say the following to the house of Yaakov, the women, and tell the same thing in a more explicit manner, stressing the punishments and fine details, so sons of Israel, the men. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I gathered you together in a short period of time, and I protected you through the angel of God as if you were carried on eagle's wings, and I brought you to my service. Now, if you listen to me and keep my covenant through observing the Torah, you'll be a precious treasure to me among all the peoples, for the whole earth is mine, and yet the other nations are like nothing to me. You shall be to me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel, no more and no less." Moshe returned and summoned the elders of Israel and placed before them all these words that God had commanded him. All the people replied in unison and said, "Everything that God has said, we shall do." On the 3rd day, Moshe ascended the mountain once again and conveyed the words of the people back to God. God said to Moshe, "Look, I'm going to come down to you in a fog within its deepest part, in order that the people hear when I speak to you, and they will also believe in you and the prophets that follow you forever." Moshe returned to relay God's words, and on the 4th day he ascended to relay the people's reply to God, that they did not wish merely to overhear God speaking to Moshe, but they wanted to hear God directly. God said to Moshe, "If the people want to hear me directly, then go to the people and make them ready today and tomorrow. They should wash their garments. They should be prepared for the 3rd day, having separated from their wives, for on the 3rd day from today, the 6th of the month, God will descend before the eyes of all the people on Mount Sinai. You should set boundaries around the mountain for the people around, which say, 'Beware of ascending the mountain or touching its edge. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. No hand shall touch it, for he shall be stoned or cast down. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the shofar sounds a long drawn-out blast, God's presence will depart, and they may ascend the mountain." Moshe went down from the mountain directly to the people. He prepared the people, and they washed their clothing. He said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for 3 days. Do not come close to your wife." On the 3rd day, when it was becoming morning before the people arrived, there were thunderclaps and lightning flashes. A thick cloud was upon the mountain, and a very powerful blast of a shofar. The entire nation that was in the camp shuddered. Moshe brought the people out from the camp towards the divine presence, which approached them, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. The whole of Mount Sinai smoked because God had descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a lime kiln, and the entire mountain shook violently. The sound of the shofar grew increasingly stronger. Moshe would speak, and in order to make him be heard, God would respond by amplifying his voice. God descended onto Mount Sinai to the peak of the mountain. God summoned Moshe to the peak of the mountain, and Moshe ascended. God said to Moshe, "Go down, warn the people not to come up to the mountain, lest they break from their present position due to their desire to go nearer to God, to see his revelation, and if any of them will fall, it will be as tragic as if many had fallen. Also, the firstborn priests, despite the fact that they usually go near to God to offer sacrifices, they should not consider themselves important enough to ascend the mountain. Rather, they shall be ready to stand in their positions. Failing that, God will wreak destruction on some of them to make a breach." Moshe said to God, "I do not need to warn them, since the people cannot ascend to Mount Sinai, for you already warned us, saying, 'Set boundaries for the mountain and sanctify it.'" God said to him, "Go down and warn them a 2nd time. Then you should ascend to the highest level. Aaron should come with you, but to a lower level, and the priests can come up, but to a lower level still. But the people must not break from their position to ascend to God, for failing that, he will make a breach against them." Moshe went down to the people and said this warning to them. God spoke all the 10 commandments in one single utterance. He went back and specified each one individually. The Jewish people responded yes to the positive commands and no to the prohibitions. "I am God, the God of every one of you, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall not possess an idol of other deities so long as I exist. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any picture of that which is in the heavens above, which is on the earth below, or which is in the water beneath the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor worship them, for I, God, your God, am a God who is zealous to enact punishment, who visits the iniquities of the fathers upon the sons, upon the third and the fourth generation of those who continue in their fathers' ways to hate me. But I act kindly to those who love me and to those who keep my commandments for 2,000 generations. You shall not take the name of God your God in vain, for God will not absolve anyone who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. 6 days you may work and perform all your labor, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to God, your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your beast, nor your convert who is within your gates. For in 6 days God made the heavens, the earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested, so to speak, on the seventh day. Therefore God blessed the Sabbath day by causing a double portion of manna to fall on Friday, and sanctified it by not bringing the manna on the Sabbath. Honor your father and your mother, in order that your days will be lengthened on the land that God your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. All the people could see the sounds which God spoke, the torches, the sound of the shofar, and the smoking mountain. The people saw and they trembled, and they withdrew backwards the full length of the camp. They said to Moshe, "You speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Moshe said to the people, "Fear not, for God has come in order to promote your reputation throughout the world, and in order that having seen his awe, you will know there is none other than him, so that you shall not sin." The people remained a long way off. Moshe drew near, first through the darkness, then to the cloud, and deeper still to the fog where God was. God said to Moshe, "Say the following to the children of Israel. You have seen that from the skies I have spoken with you, and I have shown my fire and might down on earth. You shall not make images of any of my spiritual servants that are with me. You should not make the cherubs from silver, thus rendering them as false gods. Rather, they must be made of gold. You should not make more than 2 cherubs, and if you do, I will consider them as false gods of gold. You should not make for yourselves a replica of the cherubs in your own synagogues. You shall not make for me an altar attached to the earth, alternatively filled with earth. You shall slaughter near it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings which come from your sheep and your cattle. Wherever I allow my name to be mentioned, only in the holy temple by the priests, I will come to you and bless you. When you make for me an altar of stones, you shall not build them of cut stones, lest you wield your sword upon it and desecrate it by using an object of death to it from the altar, which is an object of life. When you build a ramp to my altar, do not make it ascend with steps, so that it will not look as if your nakedness is exposed upon it." And that's it. Thank you for joining me for another weekly Parsha reading. If you found this helpful or think anyone else will benefit from just hearing a straight through reading in English, please, I encourage you to share this video, and I'll see you guys, Bezrat Hashem, next week. Wishing you a Shabbat Tov and Litraot.